Hi, welcome to Board Gems. This is my weekly video series in which I go over an older board game. Usually at least 10 years old, perhaps 20 or even 30. The newer board games kind of leave me a little bit cold. Just a stylistic choice, basically. There's not really... The newer games that come out, I don't like as much, but that's just my personal preference. But I like a lot of these older games, so I thought I'd share some of them with you. Maybe you'll get it in an auction, maybe you'll see it in the way in the back in your game store shelf, and remember that, hey, actually this is a pretty good game. Now there's a new Kickstarter coming out. By the time I'm recording this, it's not yet started, but it might have started around about the time this video is published, for a game called Hibachi by Grail Games. And Hibachi is apparently a new version of a game I'm already familiar with from 2010, so I thought I'd share that with you this week. And the game is Safranito. Let's see if I get this in shot. Is that in shot? It's by Marco Teubner and Zoch, like I said, around 2010. It's for 2 to 4 players, takes 30 to 45 minutes. 45 is probably pretty accurate. Maybe the 2-player game might be a little bit less. And the box says 10 and up. Now, it's not that complicated a game, but it is a little bit unforgiving, so I would probably stick with a 10 and up age estimate. It's a very unique game because it's a combination of two completely different styles of game. On the one hand, it's a little bit of an economic planning game, but very light economic planning. Players are trying to collect spices in order to complete blend cards. Each blend card has like 3 different spices on it. There's like 9 different spices. You're trying to collect spices. You can buy the spices for money. You can also sell them for usually more money. So there's a little bit of an economic aspect. The catch is that the way you, not bid, but the way you try to acquire these spices or decide which spices are on offer in a given round depends on poker chips. Each player has a set of 6 poker chips that they're tossing onto the board. And they're trying to land them in particular spice bowls, and there's also a couple of smaller action spaces which give them special powers. So I'm going to show you how it plays, and then I'll talk more afterwards about whether it's a gem or not. To set up the game, place the board on the table between the players. You'll note there's a little bit of a raised edge. I'm not sure how well it shows up in the video, but you can see there's a raised border here. Give each player all the chips of a single color. They range in number from 10 to 60, and they just all have the same back. As well as give out some money. 200 each player starts with. These are the blend cards. They show 3 different spices, 3 of the spices of the 9 that are shown on the board. You're going to shuffle this up and lay out some face up. The number depends on number of players. I'm going to set it up for a 3-player game, which I believe we add 2 blend cards. I'll put them over here. Hopefully this shows up in the video. And these are the spice cards. And again, these cards match particular spices on the board. So you're going to shuffle this up, and you're going to flip over a number, again dependent on number of players, which in a 3-player game should be 5. So you flip over 5. And then these go on particular places around the board. You'll see there's 9 different spices, and near each one is a little space to put the cards matching that spice. So just put them face up. And if there's more than one, that's fine. They just go all together. Choose a start player. The start player gets this pepper mill. It doesn't actually work, but it's a little wooden piece. Very nice. The goal of the game is to get these blend cards. In order to claim a blend card, you need to collect cards matching these spices. And at the end of the round, in turn order, players have a chance to claim one by turning in the cards they've collected and claiming the matching blend card. The first player to get 3 blend cards wins immediately. To do that, players are going to be taking their chips and tossing them on the board. The chips may land in the bowls, which will give them an opportunity to purchase spices of that type, but they also may land on these 4 action spaces, which give them a special ability. And then at the end of the round, starting with whoever has the peppermill, players have an opportunity to discard their cards to claim these blends. And then you set up a new round being refill this display. If there are any still here at the end of the round, they stay there, you just refill. And adding new cards to whatever may already be here. So starting with the start player, players are going to be tossing discs one at a time onto the board. You can see they're double-sided. One side shows the number, the other is blank. Generally, you'll want to toss it so the number is down, so players can't see what the number is that you're tossing. But if it happens to land face up, then it's fine. You just showed everybody what the number was. But you're going to pick any one of your discs, and you're going to toss it on the board, with the intention of it landing on either one of the 9 spice bowls or one of the 4 action spaces. Now, when you toss, you have to make sure your hand doesn't break this outer border. So your hand's not allowed to go over the board. You'll have to start from off the board and then just toss it. At the end of the round, any discs that fall outside will get removed, but leave them on the board for now. And then each player does that. In a 3-player game, each player will toss 4 discs. In a 4-player game, each player will toss 3. If a disc goes off the board, then it's just gone. And it is possible to knock other players' discs away. That's completely valid. So, at the end, then we evaluate. Now, the first thing we do is evaluate the 4 action spaces, and then whoever has the peppermill gets to choose the order that the bowls are resolved in. Now, the action spaces have a particular order, and unfortunately it's not clear from the board what that order is. I believe the order is 1, 2, 3, 4. It would be nice if they put a little number next to it, because the order is important. So the first thing that happens is we start with this action space. If a player has a disc in there, then they get to do that action. But only one player gets to do the action. If more than one player has a disc inside this space, then the player who has the highest number will be able to do the action. The other player doesn't get to do anything. In the case of a tie, it's the player of the tied players who has the peppermill or the next one in clockwise order. Now, what does it mean for a disc to be in a space, in an action space, or in a bowl? You'll notice that each disc has a little hole right through the middle. If you're not sure whether a disc is in or out, you can actually peek down into the hole. And if you see even a little bit of the border, then the disc is considered to be in. So in this case, I can see in here, and I can see a little bit of the border of this bowl, so this red disc is considered to be in. If I look into this blue disc, I can also see a little bit of border. So this is considered in. After we evaluate this action, then this one, then this one, then this one. This action allows a player to add an extra disc. They get to take one of their remaining discs and toss it. And now you can remove any discs that aren't obviously within a bowl. So in this case, this disc gets to be removed, as well as this one. Very bad luck for blue, I must say. Blue didn't do very well this round. Now, I should point out that if you throw a disc and it also lands in this action space, you don't get to do it again. But any other space is valid, we've already done this action. This space allows you to draw a free spice card. You draw a number from the top equal to the tens digit of the disc that landed in there. So if a 50 was in there, you draw 5. And you look at the 5, have a peek, and then choose one to keep. Again, only one player gets to do this action or any action. This action allows you to reserve a free blend card. The player who is able to do this action will draw the top card, look at it, and just keep it face down in front of themselves. And at the end of the round, if they have enough ingredients to complete this, then they're able to do so. And finally, this action. This action allows you to get the peppermill, which always rotates at the end of the round. So the player who gets this gets it now, which is important for breaking ties in the rest of the round and also choosing the order that the bowls are resolved in. So after the actions are done, then those discs can be removed and returned to the players. Then whoever has the peppermill, because it might have changed because of this action, chooses one of the bowls to evaluate. And all of the bowls will be evaluated, but this player gets to choose the order. They pick a bowl to evaluate, and any discs that are in that bowl get revealed. So in this case, it's a tie. Now the first thing that happens is everyone who has a card matching that spice is allowed to sell a card of the spice for the listed price. So if I had this card, even if I don't have a disc in here, I can sell this for $80. The same player cannot sell and buy in the same round. So if you have a disc in here and you choose to sell, you would have to remove that disc. Because after all players have had a chance to sell, then any players who have discs remaining in here are allowed to buy. You total up the value for each player. And of course, in this case, it's a tie. In the case of a tie, then again, you look at see who has the peppermill, and the player who has it breaks the tie if they're there, otherwise it's the next player in clockwise order. And that player gets to buy one card of that matching type, assuming there's one there. So for example, this disc is in this spice, but you can see there's no cards there. So this disc is useless. That's not going to be able to do anything. Same for this one. And this one. Wow, green didn't do very well. So the player who has the highest sum gets to buy one of these cards for the price equal to their sum on their discs. So let's say the tiebreaker went to blue. Blue is allowed to, for $40, buy this card. They don't have to, they can decline. And if they decline, then nothing happens. But regardless of whether they buy a card or not, they remove their most valuable disc in here. That disc goes back to their possession, and then you evaluate again. Assuming there are cards left, then you evaluate again who has the highest sum. So in the case, for example, if it looks something like this, then what would happen is blue would get first crack at this for $50. If they buy it or not, they remove their most valuable disc, they get that back, and then you check again. In this case, red has 40, blue has 10. If there's another card here, red may then buy that card for $40. And then they would remove this disc. And if there was a third card there, then blue could buy that last one for 10. And likewise, you do that for all the spice bowls. And again, the player with the peppermill gets to choose the order that the bowls are resolved in. So in this case, green. First of all, any player who has this card can sell for $70. And then green, assuming he didn't sell, can buy this card for $40. If they decline, then red could buy the card at $30. So after all the bowls are evaluated and all the cards are potentially bought or not, then it's time to see whether anybody can claim a blend card. Starting with the player with the peppermill, that player will check these and say, can I claim one of these? Do I have the right cards in my hand to claim one of these cards? And if they do, they take one. The one, and then they discard the matching cards. And they keep that face up in front of them. Important to note, this does not replenish yet, only at the end of the round. So whoever has the peppermill can actually be very important in terms of claiming one. If more than one player seems to be getting the ingredients for the same card, it can be very important for one of them to get the peppermill so they have first crack at it. Then the next player is also allowed to claim one. But of course, at this point, there's only one left. They would have to be able to claim that one, and if they can't, then it's on to the next player, and so on. If anybody has any of these cards, which they got from this action space, and they have the matching ingredients, they can also reveal that, turn in those ingredients, and add that face up in front of them. And that's one full round. Every player gets their discs back. The pepper mill rotates clockwise. You refill the display, so there's the correct number of blend cards again, and you add another several spice cards. So you can see there can be multiples. And the game continues like that until one player has claimed 3 blend cards, and that player immediately wins. The game is over. That's it. You're ready to play Safranito. I happen to like Grail Games as a publisher. I have a few games of theirs, including Medici, which I adore, and Stevenson's Rocket, which I unfortunately have not yet played. And they're making a new version of Safranito called Hibachi. It's inspired by Safranito, and I think that's interesting that they say it's inspired. They're not saying they're just remaking Safranito, so it sounds like they're going to make some changes to it. So when I heard this, I'm like, oh, I have Safranito. I dug it out of my storage. You can't see it on video, but I have all these boxes on this side of the wall. Originally, I was collecting board games for an eventual third location, but with the pandemic, that's kind of on hold now. But anyway, I had Safranito packed up in a box. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll dig that out, because I played it in the past and I liked it, and I thought this is a perfect board gem. So I brought it out and played it some more, and actually, this is a hard recommendation for me. Board Gems as a video series is one that's a very positive video series. I usually only cover games that I happen to want to recommend, that I think are really good games. And there have been cases that I've taken an old game, maybe the ratings aren't that high, but it's like, no, I'm going to try it. Maybe it's a hidden gem, and then I can cover it for Board Gems, and then I'll play it and I'll go, yeah, that's not actually that great, so it's not a board gem. But because of the Kickstarter, I thought I'd still go over this, even though my most recent evaluation of this game is it's a tough recommendation. So first, the positives. The production quality is amazing. So you have this board with the raised edge, and you have these poker chips. Now the poker chips, they're not the cheapest you can get, because the cheapest are like the little tiny plastic tiddlywinks. I'm not talking about those, but I'm like the super thin ones. I'm talking about like the first ones that look like proper poker chips, but like the cheapest ones, those kinds. So you can buy like a big box of them, like in a little metal case, like those kind of poker chips. It's a style in here. So they got a bit of weight to them, and they're satisfying to kind of toss on the board. So the components are great. I have no complaints about that. And of course, the uniqueness of the game is really something, right? I mean, how many games can you think of that combine dexterity with, like I said, like a light economic kind of planning game? Not that many. And the ones that I do know are really not very good. I could see that this game could also leave people a little cold, because the thing is that people who like it for the economic part might get a little frustrated with the dexterity. And the people who like the dexterity part may not appreciate all the extra rules that the economy part of it introduces. It's not a complicated economic game. I mean, it's not a heavy game at all, but there is planning. I do think it's very interesting, not just in terms of the interesting combination of mechanisms that this game provides, but the timing aspect is really interesting. So the player who has the pepper mill, and they can get the pepper mill during the tossing stage, right? It's one of the action spaces. And then it comes time to evaluate all the bowls, all the spices. And the player who has the pepper mill at that time chooses the order. And that's really important, because for each spice, you do all the selling and then all the buying. And a player can't do both. If you sell, you can't buy. But it's always in that order. And so that's a really clever part, because the players can look at the other players and say, okay, that player doesn't have much money. I forget if money is private in this game, but it is trackable. So I would just say, hey, how much money do you have, Joe? Oh, $40? Okay. And make it public. So I know Joe doesn't have very much money. And I see that he's on a couple different bowls. He probably wants to buy that one because it's on a blend card, and he's probably trying to go for that blend card. That other one's not on a blend card. Why is he doing that? Maybe he's trying to sell it. Maybe he has that and he's trying to sell it. So his preference would be that we sell first. We go to that spice, and he gets a chance to sell to make money, and then with that he has money to buy the other spice, the one he needs. But if I'm the one with the peppermill. If I choose the reverse order, if I choose the buy one, the one that he needs to buy first, he doesn't have the money for it. Maybe he had the highest bid, but he doesn't have the money to pay for that bid, so he actually has to withdraw his chip, and then maybe I have a chip there, I get it for cheaper, and then later on we can evaluate the other bowl, and he's making money, right? Joe, very important to get the sell before the buy, but I can mess Joe up by doing the buy before the sell. That part's fascinating, and that's a really fun part of the game. Again, can be a little frustrating for people who don't click into that, and they can get a little frustrated, I suppose. That makes the special actions, getting the peppermill, being able to toss an extra chip, getting an extra blend card, that's huge, getting a spice card almost of your choice, that's huge. The special action spaces become extremely important, but they're very small, and there's a lot of competition for them. Only one player is going to get a chance to do it. It is very unforgiving. So first of all, when you first set up the game, don't start playing right away. First of all, give everybody their chips and just tell people, practice. Practice tossing the chips onto the board. Just get a feel for how they land, how they slide, right? And practice. But even after some practice, people, like that first round, oh my God, chips are going to be going all over the place. It's a little bit of a disaster. But, as people get used to it, of course, it gets better. And if the same group of people play it a lot and they become really good at that part, then they overcome that, right? That's a really good, that becomes just part of the challenge of the game, as opposed to a frustrating kind of chaotic element, which it will be for those first few games. But it's unforgiving in more ways. For one thing, there are public blend cards. These are the cards that everybody's going for, right? Each card has like 3 different spices on it, and there's 9 different spices, and you're trying to collect spices in order to satisfy the blend cards. Well, each round, a certain number of spice cards come out. Of course, they have nothing to do with the blend cards, right? They're not connected at all. So what cards come out may not help immediately with those blend cards. Some will, some won't. The ones that do, there's a lot of competition for them. It takes a while to get going as a result, because the blend cards require 3 spices, and in my experience, it's rare for 3 of those spices to all come up in that first round. So you're trying to get the spices you need eventually for those blend cards, maybe some other ones because you don't know what other blend cards come up. But there's very few blend cards public. And turn order is extremely important, because the player first in turn order, the player who has the peppermill token, and you can get that during the round as part of the special action, is the first person to get a chance at those public ones. And they don't refill right away. And so 2 players could be working for the same blend card, and one player is able to get it first because they're earlier in turn order. Maybe they got that special action, good for them, but it can be frustrating for the other player. Now, it is possible to get your own private blend cards. You can do that through one of the special actions. You can get spice cards. You can flip a chip onto an action that gives you a draw of spice cards, and you get to choose one. And these actions actually become extremely important, because the rest of the game is just so tight and so hard to get done what you want, that a player who's able to get those special actions will have a big advantage, or at least I feel that way. They'll have a big advantage because they'll have their own blend cards. They don't have to worry about competing with the public ones. If they can get their own spice cards and they can line up, that's huge. And what it can also mean that the game can end rather suddenly, because the game ends immediately when one player gets 3 blend cards. And that in one round, you can get at most 1 public one, but you can reveal any number of private ones that you've collected through that special action. And so players may not realize the game is close to end. Maybe each player has 1, and one player, start player, is like, okay, I got the ingredients for this blend card, so I got that. That's 2, and I also got this hidden one that I had. That's 3. Game over, right? It's sudden. It's super sudden, and I just feel like that could leave a bad taste in people's mouths. It's a very unforgiving game, even in that economic part, because I've seen the case where players get the spices they need to get a blend card. Okay, great. They got the blend card. They turn in their spices. They have no spices left, and they have almost no money. It's not easy to get money in this game. In order to get money, you need spices to sell. So spices that you're not going to use for blend cards. So you collect spices, hopefully cheaply, that come out, and then later on, you spend turns getting your chips onto that same spice so that later on you can sell it for money, right? And you don't have to do that a lot to stay kind of afloat, but you do have to do it. On the one hand, the game can end super quickly, so some players might not even need to do. You might not even get to the point where you get into that hole. But if the game goes on a little bit longer, one player can get close, get 2 blend cards, and then because they didn't plan, you can argue they didn't plan very well, but they have no spices and they have almost no money. Well, if they don't have much money, they can't buy new spices. The only way they can do that the only way they can get more money is to sell spices. And in order to sell spices, of course, you have to first get the spices, which you buy, right? So if you're completely broke and you have no spices, you're done. In practice, I've seen I have no spices and I have very little money. And then it takes a few rounds, actually, to get your engine, it's not really an engine, but to get kind of up and going again. Because you have to very cheaply buy spices, preferably ones other players aren't competing for, buy those for cheap, and then work hard to get high-valued chips into those same spices. Later on, you can sell them. It takes 2 or 3 turns. And in the meantime, of course, other players are playing. Maybe they're not in the same hole as you. So it's I want to stress this, it's a very unforgiving game. Now, I give it a lot of points for the unique aspect of it, and it absolutely works. Its ratings are fairly high on Board Game Geek, and I think it's pretty much in demand. But my recommendation would probably not be to find this edition. This is great. Like the components are great. The presentation is great. Zoch makes great games, I have to say, in terms of the presentation and component quality. But this game isn't for everyone. And I am actually very curious. Like I said, maybe I'm recording this video a little too early, but I'm very curious to see what Grail Games does with it, because they didn't say that they are reprinting it. I mean, obviously they're doing a different presentation and everything, but they actually say the game they're making is inspired by this. So I'm very curious to see what they've changed. The game needs to pick a lane. And I don't mean, like, I love the combination of dexterity and economy that very few games provide. But it kind of needs to pick a lane, because the chips and the tossing of the chips, the dexterity element, makes it feel like a casual game. But if you treat it casually, you're going to feel pain. So if you're going to play the game, make sure everybody tries to take it seriously and give people lots of opportunity to practice the chip tossing, just so that becomes a little less chaotic during the game and players don't feel like they have very little control. Still, it's very possible for one player that some chips just land, most of the chips either land outside the bowls or off the board, and that round they're doing hardly anything and they can get frustrated. I really respect the game. I came into this video expecting to give it a glowing review and to say, you don't need to get the new Kickstarter. Find an old copy of this one if you see it around. It's just, I don't know if the new one is as good. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse, but I can confirm this one's good. I have to pause on that. I would say, before seeking this game out, check out the Kickstarter for Hibachi and see if it's a game that addresses some of the, I won't call them shortcomings, but concerns that I have about this game that make it definitely not for everyone. But I will still call it a board gem, because the game definitely works. And it's a unique combination of mechanisms that I've rarely seen in other games, and it works. It does work. it's just the chaos combined with the brutality of the game does make me pause on recommending it. But it's unique. There's no doubt about that. So it is definitely a board gem. But check out the new Kickstarter for Hibachi, and I will for sure. And let's see if it addresses some of those potential issues that I raised. Thanks for watching. Remember, older games like Safranito don't stop being good just because newer games come out. Take care.